So, one rider out here riding the fixed gear actually for the first time in a while. And I was in New York for the holiday yesterday, and I saw some stuff that I wanted to point out because I think it's important, especially from the perspective of traffic safety, especially from the perspective of a cyclist, but more importantly from the perspective of anybody who uses the roads, because we all do, whether we're biking, walking, driving a car, whatever. I saw three things, notable things, when we had to go through New York City to visit relatives. The first one was everybody who was in a car was basically not obeying the rules. Let me put it this way, the vast majority. No turn signals, didn't appear to, keep in lane, anything like that. A lot of double parking, a lot of random movement as if they were drunk, which when you understood that they weren't signaling or looking, all of a sudden became a little more, understandable, but still shouldn't be doing it, right? Second thing, pedestrians. Every single pedestrian I saw, in some cases multiple pedestrians on multiple street corners at the same time, were looking down at their iPhones. Not a single one of them was looking around them or paying attention. I even saw a guy jogging past the other pedestrians who were clueless, who was looking down at his iPhone while he was jogging. And the kicker is there was a uniformed traffic policeman standing on the corner. He was also looking down at his iPhone. Yeah, pretty bad. When it's the guy who's supposed to be telling other people not to do it that's doing it. But what can you do? And then the third thing, of course, was the cyclists. Now, most of the cyclists I saw were safe. They were riding, as you have to ride in the city, but they were being safe. They weren't, going the wrong way or hitting anybody or anything like that. But I did see a few that were doing things they shouldn't. In particular, I saw a lot of them run red lights out of the few that were doing something wrong. That seemed to be really the only major thing. Coming back, I saw a few that didn't have lights, but it was hard to tell whether they had lights and they just weren't turned on, or I don't know. But you should have lights at night, obviously. But the guys that were running the lights, running the red traffic signal, not so cool. But it is worth noting that if you look at the number of people I saw in each category, right, cars were the most numerous, pedestrians the second most numerous, and cyclists the third. But there were still a lot of each. And if you look at it, the number of pedestrians that were doing something unsafe and possibly illegal was almost 100%. Not quite, but almost. The number of car drivers, I'd say it was greater than 50%. Was it 60? Was it 70? Was it 75? I don't know, but it was greater than half. The number of cyclists I saw, out of the overall number of cyclists I saw that were doing something wrong, was fairly small for their group, right? There were a lot of cyclists. I really only saw a few doing something wrong. And of those few, the majority was, of course, running the light, which you shouldn't do. But the point is, compared to the overall number of cyclists, the number of cyclists that were running lights was very few. Now, again, out of the few that were doing something wrong, it was mostly that one activity. But the point is that almost all the pedestrians were doing something unsafe and wrong and illegal. Almost, let's say, a majority of the drivers were doing unsafe and illegal things. Out of the cyclists, a very small number in the overall total group. So there are some cyclists who break the rules, especially in crazy environments like cities. But, compared to the number of people in other groups, there aren't that many. So before you sit there and you start saying, cyclists are all a bunch of scofflaws and blah, 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 and they're the problem and they're the reason for the traffic incidents, and again, consider this. Almost all the pedestrians, including the traffic policemen, were on their iPhones instead of paying attention to what they were doing. More than half of the car drivers were engaging in unsafe and illegal behavior. Out of the cyclists, I can't even put a percentage. I'd say less than 10% that I saw were doing something wrong. Now, again, they were doing something wrong, but out of the overall number of cyclists I saw, it was a very small number. So keep that in mind. There's jerks in every group, but before you start casting stones at cyclists, just remember, where your group sits. And of course, at the end of the day, the overall goal will be to reduce these behaviors across the board, no matter what group it is. Get as many of the pedestrians as possible to be safe, get as many of the drivers as possible to be safe, get as many of the cyclists as possible to be safe. It's just interesting that the cyclists are almost already there, right? Nobody denies that there's a handful of asinine cyclists, but the point is, it's a handful. Whereas you look at these other groups, and some of the behaviors are ubiquitous. And when you see the traffic policeman looking at the iPhone instead of doing his job, that's when you know something's gotten to the point where we need to do something about it. So, Lone Rider out, and just some observations I had from going to Crazyville the other day. Take care.